let's start with the basic. We can't really answer how many words you know, but we can start to talk about what is a word. How would you define, or give me your just instinctive guess as to, or just like, what do you think of it when I say word? Like, how would you, I'm not asking for a formal definition, but when you say word, what do you mean? What counts as a word? What doesn't count as a word? A group of sounds that communicate meaning. Okay, so is ing an English word? As in, like, singing, that ing thing? A group of letters. Yeah, okay. So, now, let me ask you one thing. By letters, do you mean sounds? Does it have to be written down to be a word? Specific sounds sharing common meaning among people. Okay. Ing doesn't have any meaning on its own. Oh, but it does. What about un? Like unfriendly. Not the kind you're hoping for. Yeah. In general, I mean, like, writing definitely develops its own particular things, and it's not completely parasitic on speech, but it definitely is secondary to speech, both historically and as a practical matter. I mean, nobody learns to write and read, or, well, nobody who's born with hearing learns to write and read before they learn to speak and just listen to words, picking it up orally. Hey, cool mom. There should be something atomic about a word. That's an interesting point. That's a really good point. Is a word? Awesome. Thank you. My dinner has arrived on a plate, even. Most excellent child. Yeah, I don't even have to, like, serve myself. It's great. Not eating out of boxes. I got a server, yes. Exactly. I mean, I figure it's kind of the least she can do, given that I pay the rent. But... all right. So, the atomic thing is a really interesting thing, but we have to specify what we mean by that. So let's get a little more precise. So example sentence here. How many distinct words would you say there are in this sentence? I told you I'd be working up. I'm not going to give you 100% TLU 2 examples, but I'm going to give you some. At least the ones I could think of. So my question was distinct words, right? And so the question therefore is, what do I mean by distinct? In one sense, obviously there are 7, but in another sense, there would seem to be fewer, right? So, for example, what do we do with the repetition of slept? Right? Does that count as the same word? Yeah. So I think we can probably all agree, if we're not just counting like tokens, right? I mean, clearly there are 7 separate tokens here. But if we're not just counting distinct tokens, then the 2 instances of slept are the same word, right? Past, same meaning, both past tense. The interesting question is, what do we think of late and later? Is that 1 or 2 words? So in one sense, yeah. So in one sense, these are two separate words, and the sense in which they're distinct is basically the syntactic one, right? Late and later are two different grades, right? Late, great adjectives we talk about being graded, expressing degrees, right? Later is the comparative degree, and they are not interchangeable. You can't put them, you can't swap them. Dina slept later, but Ellie slept late. Right? They don't go in exactly the same context. So, and they have a different meaning to them. So, in the syntactic sense, yes, these are different words. However, dictionaries don't list late and later separately, right? Because later is derived very predictably from late, right? So the way we're going to distinguish this, right, is to look at when we talk about a word, we're talking about the syntactic perspective. In other words, in terms of words, we're going to say that late and later are two different words. But if we look at it from a lexical perspective, we could say, because they're, they have the same core meaning and it's just this predictable generated affix, like dictionaries will just have an entrance for late and then they'll give you like -er, -est for the, the derived forms. That's looking at it from a lexical perspective. Those we're going to call, oh, damn it. I knew I was editing this so quickly and my little transitions are messed up. We're going to call those family. So the syntactic perspective, I'll get to what we call the things in a minute. In the syntactic perspective, what we mean by a word is the smallest freestanding form in a language, right? In other words, it can occur alone in, like you can give a one-word response to an answer, or, to a question, right? If I say, what's your least favorite encounter in The Last of Us Part 2? You might answer restaurant, right? One word answer. Okay. So it can appear in isolation. Or, some words can only appear in isolation in very awkward, unique circumstances, but we still call them words because their position isn't completely fixed within the whoever wrote the dictionary was lazy. Well, it does go to printed things. Let's come back to that. I'm going to talk about dictionaries at the end. Let's come back to that. There's a way in which, like, even in a digital world, it's impossible to list, as we'll see, all the possible variations. You could do it for the predictable ones, but there are plenty that are less so. So compare the, which is a word, to un, which is not a word, right? They each have a meaning. They're both hard to pin down. They're kind of vague meanings, but we don't have to go into the details there. But the position of the in something isn't completely fixed, right? In other words, I can have like the boy, the happy boy, the tall, dark, handsome, happy boy. In other words, the is not purely attached to a noun. It's not in a rigid position within the sentence structure, right? The does include later as an adjective. Okay, fair enough. But un has to be attached to another part, right? It's un something, untie, undo, unfriendly, whatever it might be, right? So its position is fixed. So it's not, it doesn't exist as a separate element. So that is not a word. Writing, as we mentioned, is secondary. So if whether or not the written form happens to have spaces on both sides of it isn't, and we're going to see some examples where this becomes relevant, isn't the primary consideration for, you know, whether we're going to call something a word or not. So when we're looking at it from the lexical thing and considering things like late and later together, the way that dictionaries tend to group them, we're going to call these lexemes, right? So what we mean by a lexeme is a dictionary form of the word. We're using the dictionary in quotes because obviously individual dictionaries might do this. Legumes. Well, we can call them some form of pulse if we want. Some lexemes are going to be invariable. They don't change their form, right? They just sort of exist. Others change their endings. Basically, this is what we call inflection. Walk, walks, walked. Foot, feet, singular, plural. So, you know, present tense, base form, present tense, past tense. Singular, plural. All right? Base grade, comparative grade. I mean, these are just examples of inflections that you can get, right? So, walk is the base lexeme to which we add these inflectional endings, right? Same thing, foot, late. Those are the base lexemes. So if we want to refer to those sort of group of things together, we'll call it a lexeme, not a word, just to keep those things straight. Okay. Someone invite Bonk to this lecture, or Manny maybe.